Welcome back to the AI Executive Podcast, the show where we deep dive with the leaders shaping the future of business, leadership, and artificial intelligence AI. I'm your host, Albert Ramos, and today's episode tackles one of the most overlooked but very critical aspects of artificial intelligence AI, the human side of it. So can't wait. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Paul Carney, an author, innovation leader, and the founder of Perpeta, where he helps organizations unlock the full potential of human AI collaboration. So important. With over 30 years of experience at the intersection of technology, business, and human resources, including, get this, serving as the chief human resources officer for a major bank in the finance space, Paul understands that successful AI adoption isn't just about technology, it's about the people, our people using it. That's why he developed the Human AI Collaboration Framework, helping teams move beyond automation to integrate AI as a collaborative digital colleague, boosting productivity, building trust, and transforming AI anxiety into AI excellence. And when he's not working with organizations, this may be my favorite, we're going to chat about this. Paul is likely enjoying a good fine wine, holding a level 2 award in wine, or reflecting on the emotional side of working with AI, a theme that's central to his philosophy. Paul, I am just so honored to have you here. We've connected. Thank you and welcome to the AI Executive Podcast.
Great to be here with you, Albert. And that introduction, God, I couldn't have done that myself.
Well, I can't wait. I got a ton of questions, and hopefully we can fit them all in the time here. We've had a couple reps together. I mean, you're just a great guy. You're very busy. I can't wait to talk about what you got going on. I think you have some speaking engagements coming up. So why don't we just dive in? You ready to rock?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Well, Paul, as I mentioned, you talk a lot about bridging the human and the AI divide. So, what's the biggest misconception you see leaders having about AI right now?
I think the biggest thing right now most leaders are seeing about it is they believe it can solve all the problems. I guess it's
Right.
being a little bit overhyped by some, and so when it does land or they start to use it, they're thinking it's going to take care of everything, and that's not the truth. I mean, it's beyond a tool. It's a little bit more than a tool. It's a system, but it's not infallible and it's not going to solve all our world's problems. But it's going to help us really do a lot of great things.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We've been on a couple morning buzz shows. If you didn't know, well, actually, we saw you on there a couple of
Yeah.
times. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7:30 Central. We actually chat live, and we've been talking a lot about this. Not only the AI adoption and starting small, not trying to mask everything and go after everything with AI, but also
Right.
not being afraid of it due to some of these things, right? And we call them hallucinations, right, in our world, right? But there's still some of that. So still stay skeptical, still offer discernment to your point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's like adding any new colleague to your team.
Right.
You're going to have to figure out who they are. They're not perfect. They're going to have their good stuff, and they're going to have their the stuff that they're working through. It's no different, but the AI does it at scale. That's the one thing it does. It's got some advantages to it that we can't process. Like so, that's the whole fun part about it is how do we figure out how to get it on the team and take advantage of what it really can do well.
Well, you know what? What I really loved about what you put out there to help people lean in, but also have some skepticism or even just learn more about it, you created the Human AI Collaboration Framework. So, do you mind walking us through what inspired that and how does it change the way companies and people approach AI adoption?
Sure. So it's I've just logged just over 1,500 hours using AI. I actually logged
Wow.
the hours, yeah,
I
that I
love it.
spend since December of 2022 when I first saw ChatGPT, which is about a month after it came out. But as I work with HR people, being really involved with HR, I realized a lot of HR people just were either not understanding it, too afraid of it. They're not very tech savvy. I have a tech background. I was a three-time tech entrepreneur. I'm a techie by trade that fell into HR. So I really said, I got to figure out how to help HR people in particular build the competencies, build the knowledge of how to use these systems, and then of course teach everyone else in their organization. And that's when we started. As I started speaking and spoken to over 5,000 people over the past year, I started hearing questions and hearing concerns, and that's when we said, all right, what's next? What can we do for people? And that's how the framework came out. Is how do we label it and put it in a way that people are going to understand it? Again, what it can do, can't do. We'll talk in a minute, more about how to build trust with it. We ask people to let it know you and understand you and get better at serving you. Yet we don't do the flip side, which is but teach people how to understand it, right? Because trust is built on two-way street here. And if all we're doing is telling it, oh, just let it learn about you, you're like, yeah, but who is this thing? What is it? So anyways, that's where the framework came out.
Paul, this is so good, right? Even, what's interesting is you're a great example of where CHROs and human business partners are going, right? It's having this blend, or at least an understanding of how tech can amplify and empower our human resources team members to create a better team member engagement, performance management. I want to jump in there, but before I do, what I really love about what you put out there, while you have these technical skills and you can speak to it really well, you're really adamant about talking about the human side around the EQ, the emotional intelligence side. Can you explain what that is and why that's still so important, even with this technology at our fingertips?
Sure. So, just looking at quickly at a change management process, we all know change management's hard, and anything you go through to implement a system, let's just say you're implementing a human
Spot
capital
on.
management system. I mean, it's a change. And if you follow something like AdCar, you're dealing with the human side a little bit. But what we lost with the AI side is we just kind of put it out there and just said, here it is. And we didn't really figure out the change management, and that it's not an evolution in technology. It really is a brand new system that's a whole new type of relationship required. In other words, to really understand how these things become working partners and collaborators, it requires us to think about it in a different way. So again, being trained on human to human and emotional intelligence and what that looks like and how important that is for us to understand and work with each other, I started looking at it going, but not all of that makes sense in the human AI world. So we started developing what would it look like, well, for example, empathy. I'll say this today, you shouldn't have empathy with AI because it's a computer. It doesn't really care. It's
Right.
been programmed to make it look and act and feel like us, and that it cares about you and understands you. But in the end, it is still a program. Remember, I say it because it's not he or her or they. It's a computer, so we have to keep that in mind, but that's going to require a different level of relationship. So again, like I said, we should have empathy with each other, human to human, but not really, because if you have empathy with the AI and feel badly about making it do something, you're going to lose the full power. Right, you're laughing, but there's people who are
No,
like,
you're
well,
spot on.
I feel badly about asking it to do all this extra. Don't.
It's a tool. You're spot on, right? And I think as those
Exactly.
are continuing to lean in and to adopt and use, right,
Yep.
it is a tool. It is not another human. And it's so funny,
No.
language, right? And I think we'll jump into there, but language and communication skills with the technology compared to with human
Oh yeah.
people. I'm challenging leaders that you've got to understand when to speak and how to speak to, in which way, right, and how to delegate, etc. So good. That is so good. I can't wait for people to see what you just said there. That's great on the emotional intelligence side. Now, I remember reading a book, Timothy Clark, Four Stages of Psychological Safety, and I've seen you pop that up quite a bit on LinkedIn as well. So, how do those concepts around just psychological safety in general, how do those concepts apply to teams from what you've seen, especially in the human capital, human resources side, when they're working with AI tools?
Yeah, so to build that trust, the psychological safety is one of the most important factors to build trust. So you're not going to have a successful team of humans working together effectively if they don't have trust of some sort, right? That's just a given. And psychological safety, the inclusive part, is really one of the key things. Well, when it comes to human AI teams, AI doesn't care about psychological safety. It doesn't care if you include it or not. Right? It doesn't care. It's a blinking cursor sitting there waiting, right? So, but we got to get people past it because they think, well, how does it feel safe with me and I feel safe with it? But we don't. What you got to do is you got to understand what it can and can't do, and that's one of the bigger things in my mind. What the psychological safety comes in with AI is truly understanding what it's capable of and what it's not. Most AIs can't do math today. So don't try to get them, don't get frustrated when they can't do math well. Just move beyond, find other ways to do math and let them do their thing. So yeah, the trust building, the human connection, building connections and having dinners and lunches and conferences. We all know those extra times you spend outside of the office is when you really connect and get to know people. That doesn't AI doesn't care about that either. It doesn't care if you didn't follow through on a commitment. If you don't follow through on commitments more often or not, people are going to lose trust in you. AI doesn't care about that. So again, it's back to understanding it. And as you mentioned, the speaking the language part, we came across a very interesting as we started to think about how to talk about this, how to describe this. I learned Spanish as a minor in my college
Oh, I love it.
undergraduate. And so I learned, I used to go from 400 level math classes to a 400 level Spanish class. In Spanish, where we're speaking Spanish poetry, we're speaking it, writing it. I don't know how my mind flipped back and forth between those worlds, but I couldn't do it today. But luckily, I did it when I was younger. But so we started looking at what does it mean to communicate with AI? And we actually say it's like learning a language. And we have a whole chart that shows what it's like to learn a human language. You've got to learn the words, vocabulary, the grammar, you get into culture, and then you get into the dialects. Well, AI has a very specific way of language that you use. It has a very specific grammar. I'm a big proponent of structured versus verbose prompts. I think
I
structured
love that.
prompts work a lot better than just writing your content.
Right.
The culture is the biases and the programming built into every LLM. They all have it. So you just have to understand it. And then finally, the dialect, that they all have their way of processing and outputting. And, for those of us that spend a time across all the different engines and we see
I
how
was
they're all
just gonna
doing,
say that.
yeah, they all have a certain dialect. In fact, I had a guy on LinkedIn, a very good friend of mine, who tried something different. He's very popular. He's got a lot of followers. He tried something on LinkedIn, and I sent him a DM and said, "Hey, I see you're using a little AI for your thing." He goes, "Yeah, I figured you'd see it." And then I said, "What's more interesting is that you're using Claude's 3.5 Sonnet."
So
Next thing I know, my
you
phone's
can
ringing.
identify it. I love
And
it.
he's calling me and said, "How in the world did you know that I was using Claude?" I said, "Because it has a very specific way of putting words together and phrases. And I
Right.
can see a few of those in there." Now, he had changed a bunch, but I could still see it. And he's like, "Holy cow." I said, "Yeah, it's like learning a language. It had its dialect." So, when people start to understand that, they feel more comfortable. And then they're like, "Okay, now I know what it's like to deal with these things." And that's what I'm after. I'm after that, building that comfort level.
So good. Comfort level, and then also understanding, not necessarily, no one needs to have the ultra tech skills on how these things work on the back end and how to build them, right? That's not the majority of people. And specifically in the HR world, is how to use these things to communicate better, right? So that we're creating a great team member experience in our clear communication, recognition, right? Or accountability conversations, right? Performance management process, all those little things there. And I love that. And you made me think about something, right? And it was an example, and you are very vocal about experimentation on LinkedIn, right? Using the tools. It's so interesting, and this is why I always say, trust but verify, or just offer some discernment. Start using the different LLMs, because what you'll find is the output can be quite different each time. And
Yeah.
we have this framework called PICO, which is persona, information, context, and then output, or what I like to call optimization. I always ask, and to your point, I like it in a bullet point format.
Yeah.
And I always say, before you give me your output, give me 20 follow-up questions so that we can be more precise here, right? And to compare the two, if I was just to go and do my long form, here's what I need, right? Everyone knows the information part of Pico, right? This is what we do every day. This is what I need. Give me this, and then it spits it out. Versus doing it very methodically and take your time, right? The first output that it spits out doesn't necessarily mean it's the best or the most precise. You got to offer discernment. Do you agree with that? Is that how you typically do what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. And to start off, that's why I kind of show people. I explain it this way, and when I do it, people laugh when I talk about it this way. But I say, think about it. It's a pattern matching system. That's really what it is at its best.
Exactly. Right.
Does it really well, scaling levels of information, great. But think about it like a dog, because if you're just typing a bunch of stuff, it's looking at it going, "What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?" And it's going to assume at some point that you wanted X. Well, if you structure it, it knows, okay, here's what you want. Oh, here's some context. Here's some background. So you're giving it the ability to nail down, align with what you're trying to get out of it. But the second part is, like you said, is is challenging it. I have now, back in the day when ChatGPT first came out, I asked it a lot of questions about it. How do you
Right.
work? What are you? Of course, now they've put guardrails around the system prompt, so you can't really figure out too much about it.
Right.
But I still do challenge it. I still will say. In fact, it's funny. We've seen ChatGPT do it. Perplexity was one of the first ones. They started showing you their sources and
Love it.
their reasoning about how that is one of those. It's almost every thought-provoking prompt is show me your reasoning path because I want to understand where you want. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, that spot there isn't real. In other words, that doesn't exist in our industry or our profession. So what would it look like with HR? What it looks like this. So again, you're giving it that collaboration partner. And when you show people that they can do that, first of all, they're like, oh, you can do that? I'm like, yes, that's what you can do. And again, this is where the empathy comes in because they'll be like, well, I wouldn't ask a person that, or I wouldn't, annoy a person by asking them 30 questions, but you got to get past that. This is not a
Right.
person. You need to be doing that to this.
So good. So I know there's going to be a ton of fans and direct messages, DMs about EQ and what you brought up around EQ, the human aspect, and
Yep.
psychological safety. But there was something, and I stole this from you. I stole this from you because I'd never heard about it and I loved it.
You
That's
borrowed
what
it,
I borrowed it. I
flattery.
borrowed it. So
Yeah.
you have a unique concept. I haven't seen this elsewhere. It's AIQ, right? Or what you would call AI emotional intelligence. So how does someone, and as you go and consult for other organizations or as you are working with C-suite executives, including CHROs or human resources business partners, how does someone build their AIQ and is it becoming a competitive advantage?
Yeah. So again, in fact, my current speech I do is called Beyond Prompts, the 5 ways you can build the human AI collaboration. And it's built on that concept is prompt is good. And I'm not saying learning to teach people how to prompt effectively is still a very effective skill, but we got to move beyond that. And I call it building the bridge between the human trust, communication, adaptability, and the tech stuff. So
I love that.
most organizations are still just very focused on the tech. So that's where the AIQ, the AI emotional intelligence, things like self-awareness, so that people understand how they feel. How people feel about AI is going to make a huge difference in whether they
Agreed.
accept it, whether they
Absolutely.
take advantage of it. And most people still don't feel well about it. They hear all the fear mongering and they hear people saying, oh, it lies, it hallucinates, it doesn't, it doesn't have and we got to get them past that and say, no, you got to get through that. In fact, I bring up the movie I, Robot a lot in my
Oh,
speech
I
about
love that
Detective
movie.
Spooner, at the
Yeah.
beginning, and Sonny. Detective Spooner, the opening scene, if you remember that robot running down the street with a purse, a woman's purse, and he
Right.
thinks immediately it's stealing the purse. I won't give away but you find out in the end that wasn't true. He had a strong distrust, but by the end, he has to build a trust to solve a major problem. And he builds that trust with Sonny, the robot. So it's that
Love
same, that's where we take that same concept saying people just aren't understanding or fear these things. We've got to get them past that. So that's what I usually talk about this first is we got to start with the human part. If we don't
right.
start with the human emotions and help manage how you feel about these things, if you think they're going to take your job, you're not going to want to work with them. You're going to probably get them out of your Slack channel. You're not going to want them in your team meetings. So
Right.
we got to get them past that. Say, no, it's the concept of augmented intelligence. These things are going to augment our capabilities. And when we learn to do it well, it's like Tony Stark and his Jarvis coming together. Then you create Iron Man. Iron Man can't exist without Tony and Jarvis. Both of them have to come together, but it augments what Tony can do. It's not Jarvis going off and creating it. It's what Tony
Exactly.
Stark does.
Okay, so this is so interesting, and I want to get into mistakes that organizations make, right? But for the CHRO that's listening, right, it sounds like we should be pouring more into our team member, our employee base around this augmentation. We should be educating, we should be teaching. And and I see it time and time again, enterprise just not having a department or even a part of their meeting or a part of their plan on, hey, we're going to go pour in and develop our team members to use this technology. To your point, it's typically like Dr. Or Detective Spooner, tackling the robot. Like, we're not doing this. We're not having this here. By the way, speaking of that movie, I love when Doc says, now that is a great question. That's my favorite part. Those
Exactly,
are my
right?
favorite parts.
Because he's like, what do you want? And then he says, now that is a great question.
Yeah, it's so good. But what are your thoughts about that? I mean, and I guess that can lean into like the big mistakes that organizations are making because, AI has been around for a long time, mainstream,
Yep.
let's call it real hot over the last year and a half, 2 years. But we still find C-suite executives that are like, no, it's just not part of the plan. We are not going to teach our team members how to use it because of, hallucinations, data security. Who knows what they're putting in there, right? Have you seen that too?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I talk about this as a three-way path. As we're currently divided. Organizations in the world, after spending $200 billion last year on AI technology and training, we're separated into three major groups of companies. One is the waits and sees. There are still a large chunk. My guess, 60 to 70% of companies are in the wait and see. Our bank is one of them, honestly, because our CIO does not really want us to do much, and that's okay. We use it a little bit, but really not as effective as we can because there's all the issues of fraud and people are going to release privacy data. Okay, there's all those issues, but the wait and see is not a good spot to
It's
be
not.
because you're being left behind. Then you got the organizations on the right that are trying to do something, but it's all technical. They're like, hey,
Right.
we're teaching our people how to prompt and how to work with these systems and get information and process it. But they're forgetting the people part. They're forgetting the human, the AIQ type thing, the AI emotional intelligence. And then you got the ones in the middle that have figured out both. They've built that bridge between the human and the tech. They've built that sort of psychological safety, gotten momentum going. They're the ones, and there aren't many of them out there. There are a few I found through research. They're the ones getting huge productivity, huge gains, and people are feeling great about it. And they're trying to be like, I want to do more. I want to do more. So we've got to get people, at least the tech ones are the ones I'm focused on right now. At least they're focused on it. I'm going to say, all right, let's build the relationship part too.
Right.
The wait and sees are the ones we've got to get off the dock. Yeah.
You know what's so interesting about that? Because I think every organization's challenged with finding the best talent.
Yep.
And as we hear more and as people, the adoption gap, and I'm talking from an individual level professional, right? The professional is learning the benefits of productivity gains, right? Their ability to offload tasks to allow them to
Hmm.
maybe spend more time with the family,
Yep.
leisure, or some other creative task, or in the finance world, revenue generating activity, right? It's so interesting that more organizations aren't tapping in here to not only have a competitive edge compared to their competitors or against their competitors, but to attract great talent. And what I think organizations are going to find is they truly missed the boat here this year or next because this wasn't in their plan. And many of the great talented people out there are going to organizations that have been doing this, that have been promoting AI, using AI, and pouring into their team members.
And that's true. And you know what it comes down to? It's a three-letter acronym that everyone asks. It's like, what's the ROI? They're like, if we're going to put this in place and spend all this money, what do we get for it? In other words, what's that return on investment? And it's very difficult to measure the return on investment on this if you just look at it from, hey, we bought this tool, we started using it, what are we getting back for it? Because they're forgetting the human part, which again, back to when you teach people actually how to build a relationship and collaborate with these tools, the ROI comes out pretty quick. That return on the investment comes through when you start to see people get things done faster, or they start doing things that they couldn't do before. That's the other part that's so cool about it. This is why, traditional software like a human capital management system is very deterministic. It had
Right.
rules, it followed rules. You put data in, it processed, you hit the button, payroll came out. Hopefully it worked, right? If it didn't, that's a bug. But AI is not deterministic. It learns, it adapts, and it evolves. That's a whole different type of system. You can't just say, well, we'll just use it to do this. Because like you said earlier, I could use AI, just a generative AI tool to put a prompt in and get something from my onboarding process. My colleague could do the same thing, and yet we got two different results because it's not deterministic. It is based on the pattern matching, even words we used.
Right.
So we've got to teach people that exists and how to use that, how to adapt with that. That's the
Yeah,
key.
I love that. And let's give some CHROs some talking points, right? Because look, I'm a fractional CFO by trade, right?
Hmm.
And I too am asking, well, what's the ROI on that? And
Right.
I think CHROs need to be prepared to deliver that. Well, let's talk about, and I'd love to hear from you on what you've gathered and seen just in the data around turnover percentages or attrition, right? I'd love to know about team member engagement satisfaction scores. I'd imagine that's also uplifting when you have
Hmm.
productivity gains and people have better balance or are able to focus on what they want to. right? Headcount from favorability, right? And not having some shortages or putting a strain on the organization. What have you seen from the data on the measurables? It's like, and that we can give those that are watching, hey, here are some of the measurables you want to go look after. So when you get questioned about the ROI of investing in AI in your enterprise, in your organization, here's what you need to look for and have prepared.
Yep. So, in any profit business, you basically have to either show how you're going to make more money or save money, right? It really comes down to that. If you're in a nonprofit or government, it's more about how do you take what's given and allocate it the most effectively. It's the same concept. So what they've got to do is, and I help them understand to break it into two sets of tasks. There's the tasks that are the efficiency tasks.
Right.
So, and I think those are some of the top level ones you can really jump into: robotic process automation, those types of things that you can jump right into. You've got to find the tasks in your organization, in your groups, small groups, start off with pilots. Find the tasks that are time demanding, like it takes people a lot of time to process, and figure out a way, and I'll show you that in a second, how to do that, and make it more efficient and show that quick return, because that starts to see, all right, here's momentum. The more esoteric ones are where people now got something done, but in a way that couldn't have been done before. And onboarding is a great example.
Oh,
If,
yes.
if if our organization, I'm onboarding, we got 10 new hires, and we do a new hire orientation day. And I've got a branch manager who's worked 30 years in the branch in finance, and they've worked with the IT system we're using. Why would I put them through the same onboarding after the first day to go through all this training, all this, when they've got the knowledge and experience? Their onboarding should be a little different than the person who's new to the industry and needs to learn all these things. But the issue you've had in the past, when you've only got a small staff, or if you're an HR department of one, is you couldn't scale that. You couldn't say, how do I develop? Here's a profile of each of these people. Here's the things we need them to learn. Build me an onboarding. Well, before you'd have to do that individually, and it was just too much work. Today with AI, you can do it instantaneously and give them an onboarding. So that's the next level where you can do that, is to help them see that. How do they get to that next level when they can start to do things that really do have a return? The match on the investment isn't, but the engagement is. Wow, that branch manager says, I love this place because they didn't put me through all this training.
Excellent. So that's so good. So what I'd love to switch gears on, Paul, is career pathing. So there is a ton out there. We're really finding team members that are asking for more development, for more coaching, for more mentoring. So what role have you seen that AI plays in developing talent and these career paths that many employees nowadays are very vocal? You see it on LinkedIn, you see it on
Mhm.
TikTok. They're very vocal. They want more. They want more training and mentoring. How does AI play a role, especially in the HR space, human capital space, so that we can go deliver something to our team members and actually help them grow?
So I think, yeah, using AI as a tool to help in the career development, career pathing is one thing. And I think the best way to do it. So I was sharing with a group I was working with, a local workforce development team that helps people in the community develop the skills needed to get jobs and such. And they were talking about the data they've got. And I said, did you tie that to the ONET database? ONET is a government funded system that's got a tremendous amount of database. It breaks almost every job down into competencies and skills. And they're like, no, we never thought, it's too much work to do that. I said, no, you don't do it. You ask AI to do it. You say, given this information, tie to the ONET
Right.
database. So I think it's that same thing as helping. We don't necessarily have to have all the tools in house. And that's what's held most HR groups back, saying, well, I really don't have a good career mapping system. You don't need one anymore, because you can
Oh,
say,
that's good.
have the
That's
person
interesting.
fill out this profile about themselves, or what competencies and skills, kind of build something to help them identify who they are, where they've come from, what they've done. And then say to AI, build a script that says, given this profile and the ONET data, here's their current job titles, what other jobs are similar? And based on competencies, identify the competencies and skills. And then once they give you that, say, okay, now given these things, what types of training would be effective to do to build these skills and competencies so they could move to this other job? I mean, it's just, again, AI has access to vast amounts of information that we can use it prompted the right way and step. You can't ask it all in one big thing. You got to get
Right.
each thing down. But by the end, I mean, whether an HR person's walking someone through this, or we teach people, here's the prompting process, fill in the information, and then just keep interacting with it. And before you know it, they've got this wonderful plan that says, awesome, I've got something I can go do.
So what I love about what you're saying, right, and it actually goes into both of our frameworks where we have this thing called the AI AMF framework. I know you've seen it and you were a
Mhm.
reviewer, and I love your framework as well. And it really is for our HR leaders out there and executive C-suite leaders is understanding and evaluate what is the problem here. Let's talk about the human capital side of things, right? What's our problem here when it comes to, is it attracting the right talent? Is it keeping them? Is it developing them, right? We're seeing some low scores and satisfaction scores specifically from our employees share their voice. Like, what is the pain point? Don't try to do it. Don't try to do it all. Don't try to do it all, right? And so I think that's the big piece is understanding where that pain point is and then digging in, right? You were great when you just shared around analytics and measurables and then not having a cookie cutter approach. It's
Yeah.
hyper personalization with this technology. And that's exactly where you're getting into. And that was interesting because again, here I am, and I'm learning too. We're all learning, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
what's a good general broad brush using this technology for people in their career pathing and development plans? And you just challenged my thought there, and I love it. It's like, wait a second, no, we don't have to do it how we did it before.
Right.
We need to do it with them and make it hyper personalized, right? A customized experience that does require teaching our employees on how to use this technology. It's not just, the ivory tower doing it and then, it's a top down approach. It's with our team members, especially those that are raising their hands and saying, I'd like more. I'd like to grow with this organization. Those are the best.
And that's the adaptability part. That's the AIQ. That's the stuff we got to teach them because, like you said before, right, we were stuck in this deterministic model thinking, okay, to do career pathing, I have to map it to here and tie it to this data. We don't have to. We can actually break out of that deterministic mode, but we got to teach people how to adapt to start thinking that way. I think that way anyway. I'm an innovator guy. I'm one of those big picture
Love it.
guys. So I've always
Yes.
thought that way, which is why I love AI. But I realize a lot of people don't think that way. But that's the AIQ. That's the thinking in different patterns and teaching people. And again, I don't want them to depend on the HR team or their manager to do this. I want them to figure out how to do this themselves.
Right.
It comes down to value. Our issue with hiring and retaining and developing people really is not a skills gap or competency gap. Those are involved. It's a value gap. It's what value do they bring to the team? What value do they bring to this job? What value do they bring to this role? And until we can match the values, which I think AI is going to help us to match the value, because again, I could come from a different industry, but bring high value because I bring in stuff that in ways that the banking industry is not thinking about when I
So
came
good.
from tech. We did things in tech because we had to do it that way. Well, bankers have always done banking the very conservative way. Well, it's like, wait a minute, why don't we? Which is what fintechs are doing to the banking industry. So, it's that, but those are adaptability skills. Those are adapting creative thinking. They think the AI is going to make us dumber. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I
I
think with the
agree.
power of
Yeah.
AI, if we teach them how to use it well, they'll actually be able to develop higher critical skills, critical thinking skills, and creativity skills because this thinking partner, this collaborator, is unlike anything we've had access to. It's awesome.
You're firing me up, and now I'm going to take it in a couple of angles. So, number one, I want to switch gears into we're going to call out the CFOs now and our business owners. So I'm going to
Mhm.
switch gears into finance because I saw some really interesting things that you've chatted about and posted about. But before I do that, you really got me going with it is not going to make us dumber. It's going to allow us to be more creative. And
Yeah.
I got to say, and I want to chat about this more. And I don't know if you're hearing this. And again, this comes down again to the team member experience, but I really do think AI is going to allow us to offload a lot of things that has been making the brain go haywire. I don't think our brain, at least what we use of it today, is at the capacity and speed that this technology has been, right? It's outpacing. There's so many inputs. And what I'm getting at, and I'll land this plane, is mental health, right? It is truly a topic of conversation. And I think enterprise organizations and businesses are starting to chat about it more. So they offer, some benefits that allow team members to use some resources, which I think is so important. But I think AI can be used for good there too, right? Is these productivity gains and just hyper personalization around development plans and such, but offloading a lot of the things that we don't need a team member to store or memorize. There's just so much anxiety in in corporate America, especially when you're starting new, right? There's
Mhm.
so much anxiety, and I think we can do as leaders of our organizations. I really do think not only all the things that Paul and I just mentioned here, as far as the benefits go, and what organizations can do to really tap in to get that ROI, But I think it's also our duty to talk about and use this technology to help our team members where they're at. Speaking about empathy, meeting them where they're at. And many of our team members are battling from a mental health perspective. And we have to be able to use this technology to improve that too. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I call it automated agony. We've put people into these, these workflows
Yes.
that, and just it's like, well, click here, do this, that, and then it's automated agony. It's like it doesn't work, or you don't understand, and it's not getting better. And this is the difference. This is the difference of the organizations. There's certain organizations that are bolting AI onto those workflows. Well, guess what? Actually making it worse because it's making the agony, the automated agony, work faster. They get
Exactly.
frustrated quicker. So,
Right.
what they've got to do, and this is the key to what organizations, and it's not easy. Talk about change management. They have to blow up their workflows. You have to take apart all these workflows, and again, start with simple ones and redesign them. Redesign them with AI as a part of it so that the person's not one sitting there clicking something. The AI could be clicking or managing and doing, and then bring it back. Now, always keep the human in the loop, but that
Right.
requires a whole new way of thinking, back to the adaptability skills, thinking about your workflows without humans involved. And that's hard for people, back to why we got to build the trust and the relationships. Because if I say to you, hey, all this stuff you guys used to do, we can have just AI agents behind the scenes doing it and then present it to you. They're like, well, what's my value, right? I mean, talk about emotional, their anxiety levels and their
Right.
mental health wellness. They're going to be like, well, what do I do? What's my value if they're off doing this stuff?
Exactly.
No, your value is the human still, because we put it real in the real context of the world and make sure it makes sense. Oh, and it got all that work done in 10 seconds versus you taking an hour. Now you've got 59 more minutes to now focus on things we weren't able to focus on before. More personalized services, or taking care of people, or meeting with people to say, what's going on? How can I help you? Where we didn't have the time, right? Because the anxiety is, we're like, no, I got too much to do.
And we may have to have you back on because we can go another hour down that road. And I think it's important. I think it's important. It's an important conversation. And
Yep.
you're right. It really comes down to building self-esteem, and having team members understand their value and how we can
Hmm.
reposition them if things are getting more automated or being taken from them because
Yeah.
AI can now do, right? Imagine the anxiety, like, am I next? Like, what's being cut? You know what I mean? And we
Yeah.
don't want team members to feel that way. What a horrible position to be in. And as leaders of the organization, you have to be mindful of that as you're
Yeah.
implementing, right? As you're integrating, also be mindful that you have team members there are now thinking, well, when am I next? And we can't have them living in that anxiety, to your point, that agony.
Right, that automatic. So you've got to be transparent. And actually, here's the other thing, and we all know this from an engagement standpoint: involve them in the discussions.
I
Don't
love
just
that.
come on from
Please.
high and say, "Here's a new AI tool.
Yes.
We've dropped it in," and hey, no, you involve them in the discussions. Because at the beginning, if they're all like, "Yeah, we don't want that," we're like, "Well, why not?" Well, because it's going to do all the work we're doing. What value are we? Well, let's find what value you are going to add. What else can we
Right.
have you do? And start those discussions, the human side of it, and then they'll adopt and adapt to the AI in ways that you can't get without that.
Right.
So, yep.
So you made me think of something and actually introduce you to her, and I'll give her a little shout out to Natalie Dahl. She's a fractional CHRO. Introduced you on LinkedIn. She's excellent. I worked with her a couple of times on some projects, and one recently, speaking of the human resources department and the clicks and all of that, we actually were able to, well, have you ever been with those organizations where, I'm looking for my benefits, my 401k, my
Mhm.
SOP of XYZ, right? And it's all in there, but the team members
Where?
just, man, it's like 8 clicks. Like, I don't know where this thing is, but it's in there. It's in your intranet or whatever, or your hub, And so Natalie and I know you worked on some things like this internally, created using AI, created an internal HR business partner chatbot.
Hmm.
And so rather than the employee emailing our human business or employee relations business partner or creating a ticket, right? Where do those tickets go? They were able to interact with this chatbot and got what they needed within seconds versus the time of this back and forth, or maybe I wait 48 to 72 hours, right? Have you experienced a lot of that? And do you see that? Do you see HR going that route where a lot of these employee relations or employee questions, feedback needed, right? It can actually be, we can solve this time waste with AI.
Yeah, I have. The bigger challenge is and it's not really a technical challenge, it's a person problem again, but is, getting what those would be basically be as little small language models versus the large language models, is bringing it in house on your network so that your
Right,
corporate documents are secure and it's not
right.
out in some world, LLM. But so it's really just setting that up, which again, there's more and more capability of doing that. The bigger problem you got is, okay, so you got all those documents, you get a little small language model thing on your corporate network, but you need a prompt engineer. This is prompt engineer. What we do is not prompt engineering. What we do is prompt design, technically, how we interact with prompts. But prompt engineers are the ones that take that document set and say, here's how to respond when people ask these types of questions. Here's where that data is located and how to respond to it, because you have to train them. You have to train them on where this data is. And that's the challenge right now, is a lot of those prompt engineers that have business knowledge and capability. And by the way, find them, they're getting 300 and 400,000 a year right now, not creating enough of them. The demand for them is so high. So I
Right.
think that's what's holding some companies back, is they just don't have that. They got their documents and they want to do that. They've got hands around their data. Some still don't have hands around all their data, but they got to set up that system so that they can do it without putting it into the large language model.
All right, I'm jumping into it. You've been in banking, finance, HR, human resources, and tech, right? And recently on LinkedIn, I saw it. My ears, I was on it, and I've been going back and forth to it because I thought it was really cool. But you shared financial analysis AI prompt for business owners, right? So this is for the business owners, the CFOs, controllers out there. How do you see AI transforming how small businesses manage their finances and their strategic decision making?
I see it, as, and again, as someone who has run a small business before, it's one of those things where you've only got so much time, and so you're focused on your time and talent or whatever the product and services you're doing, but then you have all the administration stuff. You got your marketing, you got your sales, you got your finances, accounting. We all know cash flow. If small business hasn't figured out now, you can make all the money you want, but if cash flow is not happening, it's going to be hard to survive. So it's really, and so how do you depend on that? Well, you had a QuickBooks before. If you were lucky, you might have an accountant or a finance person that would help you kind of figure it out. But if you didn't have access to those, or you did, but you just didn't use them, AI now can help you do that. Yeah, my prompt I did for the small business people keeping track of their finances is helping you put data, building profiles of here's what's going on in my world, and tell me what am I not paying attention. That's another great thing that AI is good about. So you could
Right.
ask it to say, okay, help me, tell me what my revenue model looks like and cash flow looks like. That's okay. You can do that in spreadsheets. What you really can do, though, is say, what are the things I'm not paying attention to that I need to be paying attention to before they become important? And that's the type of thing that AI can give you, that's going to be a nugget that you're going to be like, oh, never considered I had to worry about that, or that was an issue. To give you an example, just a very quick one, got a sister-in-law that owned a veterinary clinic, and they had some issues with a person, and they turned to me and said, hey, what are your ideas on how to handle this person? They're not showing up to work, not doing this, and we want to terminate them. And I asked her and said, how many employees do you have? Oh, we got 16. I said, oh, well, you just passed the 15 employee threshold. So now you're subject to a whole new set of federal laws that you didn't. And like, oh, really? Like,
Right.
yes, there's a thing called the accommodation process. So, that type of thing, they had no idea. But yet, if today they build a little prompt and say, we got these issues with employee, you don't name them. You just say, here's the types of things, da 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 da. And, your profile says we're at company X, 15 employees. The AI will come back and say, you're going to be subject to these following federal laws. Be careful. You should consult with an attorney. So it'll avoid them of getting sued when they do terminate them and
Right.
didn't do the right stuff. So that's the stuff that I think is going to help small businesses answer questions they may not be aware of.
So good. This next question, I'm really excited to hear from you on. I've followed a lot of the work that you've done, and honestly, I mean, people need to reach out to you. You're an executive coach, truly. You're a true leader, and
I am
honestly,
going to
I
start an AI after hours. That's
can't
going to be
wait.
for CHROs, where I'm going to teach them a lot about AI after hours. We're going to enjoy, after the work day's done. I am starting that up. So
Excellent. So good. So I would highly recommend those CHROs out there. Please get a hold of Paul. I mean, just your coaching, your leadership style, and then just how your future thinking is so impressive. Speaking of the future, right? 2025, and as we go into 2020, or looking out into 2026, What is that one leadership skill for CHROs and for any leader out there that people need to start pouring into more, developing as we start to use more of these AI tools that are going to be taking things away from us, but it's going to require us to be better at X? What leadership skill is that?
Yeah, I would say the best skill to develop is adaptability, and it's break us out of that. It's some people have got the skill of, okay, when you hear, well, that's how we've always done it. Most people can get past that as leaders and say, okay, that's fine, but can we do it differently? And that's great. But really being able to adapt to a whole new way of
Right.
thinking, as we've talked about a couple times already here, when we both went to, sometimes you go to, well, but you got to break that mold and say, no, think about this totally different. Adaptability skills and creativity skills are actually not that hard to develop. You just got to develop them the right way. There's certain ways to develop. And I see adaptability and creativity kind of coming hand in hand, even though they're slightly separate. But if you can develop those two skills, you'll help other people understand, because when you start teaching people that, they start to go, oh, I didn't think about that. I
Right.
hear that all the time. I didn't know AI could do that. I almost made it my trademark. Yeah, I didn't know AI could do that. Yes, it can. So.
Yes. Any books that you recommend for our leaders in the audience specific to that creativity and adaptability?
So, I've got a whole library of them that I probably put a whole list together.
Yeah,
I
we'll
would
put
say
those in the
that,
comments.
what's that?
We'll put it in the comments too in the
Okay.
show notes, just so
Yep.
everyone can
I'll
start
send
thinking
those to
like you
you.
do. I love it.
I will say the one book that really made such a difference, it's an older book by Daniel Pink called Drive. And it
So
talks
good.
specifically, yeah, I love it. It actually, when I wrote my book back in 2018, I used a lot of, and gave him attribution to a lot of the concepts. But that whole autonomy, mastery, and purpose, how to motivate people, I still think that's so basic and so important today that everything you do should be around there. And AI is no different. So we got to teach people how to build autonomy, mastery, and purpose with AI on the team. I think it's just even more important today. So to me, that's the book that I use all the time that says gives you the basics. You got your 7 habits. There's a lot of other things out there that'll help you develop. But I really think that if you understand that autonomy, mastery, and purpose, it'll fit into everything.
That's great. Well, good. I can't wait to put that list in the show notes and comments,
Yep.
right? We'd love to think like you do and then also enjoy what you're reading as well. So I know you're a busy guy. I got one last question for you. And this, I feel like I don't see this enough. And I love that you're putting this out there and just challenging us to think differently. What roles does ethics what role does ethics play in the human AI relationship? And what do you think companies are currently getting wrong here? And what can they do about it?
So, ethics has a wide range. I think when people think the ethics, they're thinking of they kind of go to cheating and that type of stuff. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is, and I say this all the time, I don't apologize for using AI. I don't, I give it attribution. In fact, I've created virtual Perpeta Paul. He's my person that helps me write a lot of stuff. There he is. He helps me because he's AI. So, don't apologize. Don't make excuses for it. And don't feel guilty about using it because it's a powerful tool. But, ethics is, a lot of people also think ethics is about compliance. And there's the moral compass piece about making sure you're doing the right things and not privacy issues and stuff. That's fine. One of the things that's most important is managing risk. Ethics is really about managing that risk,
Right.
and you got your likelihood and impact type thing. And you really got to care about the ones that are high likely, high impact. And it's funny because I talk about this in my speeches. And when you identify the things that are highly likely and high impact to your organization, they're not a tech issue, they're people. It's just like, who is the worst person? What's the worst part of your corporate network, like with phishing and stuff? It's not the technology. It's the person who opened the PDF that shouldn't have opened a
It's the
PDF and now
people.
spread a virus on your network, right?
Right.
It comes down to the people. We spend a lot of time and effort teaching people how to avoid phishing and scams and those types of things. The same thing's true with AI. Most of the AI high risk or ethical issues really related to how we use the AI. So we've just got to continuously build that relationship and teach people that this is the appropriate way or this is not an appropriate way. And if you use it to generate content, which is great, give it attribution or make sure it's your content still. Add your stories, do your pieces, do your parts, and don't be afraid to say, I always tell people, someone says they feel guilty. I said, well, would you talk to your colleague to get ideas and come up with something? They're like, yeah, that's fine. AI is no different. Do you
Exactly.
give your colleague, attribution? Well, yeah, I talk about, right. So say, hey, yeah, this is a great way I used AI to do this. And after a while, I think we're going to get past that. I don't think people are going to have to say, yeah, I used AI. I think eventually people are going to be like, well, you didn't use AI? Well, then why
Exactly.
not? Right?
Right. We're getting close. We're getting
We're getting
close.
there.
Well, this was so good and so powerful. I really appreciate just your perspective, and you're just so transparent on LinkedIn. And I love how you're breaking down the human side
Yeah.
of AI and really making that a point is we can't lose our authenticity, our vulnerability, that human piece, the relationship piece, especially for those leaders out there that have a platform and that are leading others, right?
Mhm.
So before we jump off, I'd love the audience to know, and not even, and I didn't even highlight. I know I mentioned you were an author, but let's talk about where people can find your book, where they can find you, how they can communicate with you. Where can we find you?
Well, the best place is on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of my time, managing on LinkedIn, and I do have an X also, which was resurrected and putting more stuff out there. But really, LinkedIn's where I put a lot of my thought leadership stuff on AI or challenge or even challenge myself. I have a prompt a day newsletter out on LinkedIn that I put a prompt out there every single day. Yep. And I have an email newsletter, promptlyhr.com. You can get an email. That's a weekly newsletter that goes out, very HR specific. The prompt today is for everyone. And one of the bigger things is, and on my website, on LinkedIn, on my website, I link for my website, we're building this new thing. So I have a whole bunch of content where I was putting together classes and speeches, and I do this a lot. And then people come up and say, what's next? What's next? They'll take my classes, like, what's next? And I'm like, well, I could build another class. And I realized, well, that's not helping people. So what I've started to do, working with people, we're building an AI learning community. So it's going to be a community where you can come in, I'll guide it, I'll put stuff out there, but I want people to share their best practices. I want people to show that prompt. I had a woman walk up the other day and show me how a prompt she had used worked really well. And I'm like, that's awesome. I want her to put that in the community and have other people go, oh, that's cool. So it's not just me. And eventually, if people have some vendors that, there's a certain AI vendors, I'll bring the vendor in and say, hey, come do a quick demo to our community and talk. So, it's a continuous learning journey is what I looked at. So that's why we're building this community for people to continuously learn, come out, share with each other, because it's not just about me. While I know a lot, I don't know everything, and more people know stuff about it. You know so much more about how you guys are using AI than I do. So it's one of those things I'm excited about it. It's taking shape. It's probably going to morph a few times. We're going to just release it out there, see what it does, and then kind of figure out what's it need to look like, because I don't know exactly how this thing's going to work. I'm just going to put it out there and say, let's figure it out.
Excellent. So, Paul, thank you so much. Such a wealth of knowledge. You're always bringing the value and creating an impact for us leaders out here. And I just challenge the audience, go buy his book, get the list of books that we're going to put and start reading in the comments. And then we'll head over to your website. You have a ton of information out there that you're providing, from your prompts to your newsletter. So we're really excited about it, Paul. Thank you so much. Again, such an honor for you being on. We appreciate your time. And that's it, y'all, for the AI Executive Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.